A very warm welcome to HealthPot. My name is Brenda Jakira and I'm sitting in for Edwin Austin Mukalazi. And HealthPot is brought to you by Makerere University School of Public Health and Church of Uganda Family TV. Now this month we have been talking about nutrition, and today in particular we are going to narrow down into obesity in childhood. And with me in studio I have Dr. LYDIA PAPALO, and she's going to take us through this. Thank you so much for coming, Dr. LYDIA.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, kindly introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm called Dr. PAPALO LYDIA Dramani, specialist in childhood pediatrics. Yeah, just graduated Monday this week. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, now getting already into this topic, I want you to talk about what obesity is.
Okay, basically obesity is one of the conditions associated with malnutrition. Actually, it is on the other side overnutrition. I know most times we are aware of undernutrition. Obesity, basically, in children, we look at body mass index, where we look at weight divided by the height in meters squared. So any child who has a BMI greater than 3 standard deviation for the mean for the age and sex, that will define obesity.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like you to take us through the risk factors. What are those things that bring obesity in children?
So obesity, we look at so many things, risk factors that will predispose our children to obesity. One of them, we have family history, that is the maternal obesity. If a mother has obesity, a child has 3 times risk of being obese. Then we have other conditions.
Did you say 3 times?
Yes, a child has 3 times risk of being obese.
Okay.
Yeah, so a mother has a 3 times risk of giving birth to a child who is overweight. Then we have what we call genetic conditions. One of the conditions, I think, common in our setting, we have what we call Down syndrome. Also we have what we call Turner syndrome. Then there's another condition called Prader-Willi syndrome, which is not common in our setting, but we have also the children who present with obesity as one of the things. Then we have some other conditions like hypothyroidism. Those are hormonal disorders, meaning the child is born with insufficient thyroid hormone, which is needed for metabolism. So these children will present, they're very weak, they're very inactive, and they're big. Yeah. So that's also the dietary aspect. You find that children, what you eat, the intake is really very important. You find that the children who consume more carbohydrates as opposed to the protein, that will predispose to obesity. So the dietary aspects, as they reach in adolescence, they have increased risk because of the behavioral state, they end up consuming too much, so that predisposes to obesity. Yes.
So I know about psychological factors. Do they also come to children and cause obesity?
Of course, one of the ways which children adapt when they are stressed is the adaptation is through overeating. So some people overeat in order to alleviate their stress. So that can still predispose to obesity. Yes.
Yeah, so how I was just wondering about what are those things that would stress children to a point of overeating?
Of course, one is the family situation. You find that there are some children who do not get the care and love they get. So they opt to eat in order to alleviate that stress. Even the school environment, at times you find that the children, maybe they're relatively bigger than their colleagues. So the children, their colleagues laugh at them. So now what the best they can do is hide in their corners, try to eat, to forget about their problems.
And eat more.
Yes, eat more, which will alleviate their stress.
And you talked about diet. I just wanted you to expound a little bit more of how diet brings about obesity.
So in the diet, we have proportions of each of the foods we encourage people to eat. We have the proteins, we have the carbohydrates, we have the vitamins, which are the green leaf vegetables and the fruits. So in our daily diet, we encourage more of the proteins because it's needed for the growth. Then the carbohydrates are needed for energy. But at times, because the carbohydrates, most of them are sugary foods, and you find that children take more of these. And how does it come in place? You find that we have companies that are promoting their products like sodas.
Yes.
So these sweet fruits and a drink, so children end up drinking them. So you find that these are ways of promoting the companies, but yet what is in them is not worth for the children. So they end up the consumption of more of the carbohydrates. So yet we encourage the protein part has to be more than the carbohydrate aspect, which is needed for the growth. But you find at times that children take more carbohydrates as opposed to the proteins and the leafy leaves here too.
Yeah. So actually, we have a lot of cereals on the market and many other snacks that are being encouraged by these companies to be bought. They say they are safe, but how can a parent know that this is safe for my child?
Of course, one thing is we prefer natural foods as opposed to the processed foods, because you look at the content in it. One is the oils. You find that these fast foods, they contain more of the oils, which are source of lipids, which is not good for the health, as opposed to the natural fruits. That's why you find that children from low socioeconomic background, because the parents are unable to avail these foods, they are naturally healthier than the children who come from wealthy communities and were able to afford these other food items.
Yeah, if you've just joined us, we are talking about obesity in children, and we have just brought out a few points about things that bring about obesity in children. Now, I would like us to draw into the physical complications that come with obesity.
So, obesity has a number of complications. One of it is just the growth. So, you find that the children who are obese, some of the things are associated with the growth rate. Some of them are predisposed to what we call precocious puberty.
Yes.
Because we know normally puberty sets about 13, 14. That's where the sparks happen. But you find that because of the fat content and all that, they are predisposed to what we call precocious puberty. It means those changes of puberty may happen earlier than as anticipated, especially for the girls. You find that they begin developing their breasts and pubic hair and all that by 8 years, actually, when it's not the ideal time. Then the other thing is, we shall talk about, is on the orthopedic complications. Orthopedic basically looks at the bones.
Yes.
You find that because the child is overweight, that has an impact on the bones. So you find that those children who have those curved limbs, because of the weight which is compressing on the bone.
Meaning it starts early from birth?
Yes, because as you grow, the bone strength is supposed to improve. But
Yes.
because of that weight, it's not proportionate to the strength of the bone at that age. So you find that they get those curvy limbs. Yes.
Is it similar to rickets, or this is
So this is, of course, rickets also have that kind of board legs. But for rickets, basically, it's vitamin D deficiency. But for this particular one, because of the weight, the impact of the bone on the weight on the bone, so that will cause them to have those board legs. Then we have other conditions like diabetes, type 2 diabetes.
Yes.
So you find that the cause in diabetes basically is to do with what we call the hormone called insulin, which is supposed to help us store our sugars. So at the end of the day, you find that these children, they are predisposed to diabetes. Then childhood obesity also.
How often do you get these children who have type 2 diabetes?
So type 2 diabetes is not really common. We have more of type 1 diabetes, but obesity is just a risk factor, because you find that there's childhood obesity can predispose to adult obesity. You find that somebody has obesity when they're children, then they grow into adulthood. So that increases the risk of the type 2 diabetes. Then we have other cardiovascular conditions, like the coronary artery diseases. That is to do with the heart. So obesity can predispose to that.
Yeah, I just wanted you to expound a little bit more about how it comes about, the cardiovascular complications?
So we have the fats, what we call the lipids. So they end up being deposited in those your arteries.
Yes.
Yeah, so that will predispose that makes the heart weaker. Then
Yes.
so the heart fails to function. So some of them can actually end up with heart failure just because they were obese. Then the fats end up in other locations, which is not supposed to be the ideal.
Yes.
Of course, the other things are the psychological complications. One thing is when somebody is big and then in their community, everyone looks at you, because you may end up not building those friendships you are supposed to because you're the only one in the community. So they end up being depressed. And then it also affects other social aspects of life, like family. You find that some of these people in their older ages, even starting up a family, getting a spouse, becomes challenging to them. So you may find that people may consider people who are a bit lean as opposed to what we call the fat ones. So you find that they're alienated, they don't have spouses, so they end up not achieving the child production aspects of their life. Yeah.
So we are going to, for now, to stop at that, and then we shall take on after a water break.
Okay, thank you.